Okay, so in the previous video I had said that the immigration debate kind of breaks down into two different positions, two different analyses of possible immigrant criminality. There's, kind of the what the anti-immigrant libertarians, such as Hans Hermann Hoppe, say about this, and I'll just say Hoppe's supporters generally, because I don't want to go into an analysis, a deep analysis of Hoppe's written works. He sometimes makes points consistent over the entire balance of the work, where I feel he's fairly inconsistent, in supporting points that he makes. But in terms of being a propertarian or a property above all else libertarian who is, against really against any common property. They're basically against parks and public thoroughfares to, or they want, extremely locally funded versions of those things. Even in the most locally funded version of those things, you find that the community breaks down according to different values in the community. So whereas I might, tolerate someone sitting on a park bench and say, well, no reason to call the police there, even though they seem like they're going back to that park bench and sleeping, no harm done. And then, when there come to be squatters camps in these various parks, and you say, well, the public parks have been harmed quite a bit by being turned into squatters camps. That's possible, and it happens sometimes. It happens quite frequently, and if your police are not willing to use force to kick the people out, you just won't have any nice public parks. And to that I basically say, so what? So what if there are no nice parks? The entire society is being destroyed. The entire society is anti-libertarian. The entire society has these insane, out-of-control cops running around, cracking skulls, and shooting innocent people, and confiscating far more property than all the private robbers and thieves put together. The police now confiscate billions and billions, and it actually, since 2014, it's been more than all private criminals confiscated put together. So as long as we have organized criminality as our system of government, we should expect all kinds of negative consequences in how people live. But will the cops cracking skulls and kicking the Somali squatters out of the park, improve society? Well, not really, because there may be, an Albert Einstein among those Somali squatters who's just trying to get by and, trying to further his own position. And the more that you give the police the ability to crack down on the Somali squatters, the more that they crack down on your sons and daughters who attend a free speech protest at Berkeley, and then they get their skulls cracked open. Then they get hauled away. They get put in prison for 24 hours when they would have gone back to their college dorm room and learned more about how to make the next computational or chemistry breakthrough. So all these instances where we can increase the power of the police, it is the increased power of the police that is at the core of the destruction of Western civilization. Because if at any time the police decided not to enforce all these socialist laws that we have, that would be a limit on government power that's actually built into the common law. The police are supposed to actually judge the law. They're not just supposed to mindlessly enforce the law. That's the idea of dictatorship, of totalitarianism, is that the police are just there to mindlessly enforce the law and to leave their own judgment out of things. Well, if they don't judge the law at a philosophical level, they're perfectly content to enforce laws that punish people by arresting them and entering them into the system with no injury and no intent. At every step in the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch, and the jury, of course, is the greatest limit on government power. But at every step in the other three sociopath-dominated branches of government, there's always the chance for those branches to limit the power of government, to choose to limit their own power. and their own exercise of power. And they never do this. They only strain at the reins to increase the overall amount of power that government has in the three conventionally described branches of government. So, at one end of the spectrum, you could say that harm caused by immigrants, you could say that a whole bunch of openly, directly, immediately criminal immigrants come into the country as they have in Europe, and they're all a part of a criminal gang that's united by the same criminal manifesto. And that criminal manifesto is the Quran. And the Quran encourages criminality from a Western perspective. There's no getting around that. There's no denying that. You can deny it all you want, but that's the truth if you actually read the Quran. So there are people who don't interpret the Quran in an incredibly destructive way, and to those people I say, well, why have half a shit sandwich? Why not just throw out the whole thing? But it's okay, they are admittedly there are plenty of moderate Muslims, but the percentage of Muslims who are not moderate is a severe problem. And so maybe we want to vet people at the border.